Battle for Kooyong 3. Revenge of the Sith?
Question mark.
Last election I spent a lot of time watching the goings on in Kooyong. It was really top tier political entertainment. The future of the Liberal Party and sitting treasurer pitted against an independent candidate. The 2022 campaign started out like I'm guessing most campaigns in Kooyong have, with the Liberal candidate sitting pretty on what had been one of the safest Liberal seats in the country. In 2022 it was Liberal golden boy Josh Frydenberg seemingly feeling quite confident in his incumbency. But that confidence started to disappear as the election inched closer. By the time the Libs acknowledged they were in serious trouble in Kooyong and started throwing wads of cash at the electorate, not to mention the comical Josh keeper walking billboards, it was too little too late. Josh lost his seat in what was probably the biggest upset on election night. Unsurprisingly, the Libs didn't take that too well, and they look like they are throwing everything they have at regaining the seat, with the support of right-wing misinformation factory Advance plus the usual suspects in the media. Since the 2022 election, there's been a lot of talk and speculation around a Josh comeback. It was a will he or won't he saga that ran for over a year, and at times seemingly spurred along by the man himself. It even extended for months after the Libs had actually selected Amelia Hamer as the new candidate for Kooyong. When the Kooyong electoral boundaries were recut, Josh appeared to express renewed interest, with the electorate absorbing roughly 30,000 voters from the retired Higgins electorate. I guess things appeared slightly more favourable for the Liberal Party, obviously favourable enough for Josh to pop his head up again. And clearly there was plenty of polling going on in the background, but obviously nothing that gave Frydenberg enough confidence to believe that he'd be successful if he took another run.
Amelia Hamer, still the Liberal candidate for Kooyong, as Josh Frydenberg's flirtation with a comeback fizzles.
I think Josh is a fantastic figure in the party, but I'm the candidate for Kooyong and I intend to continue standing.
So here we are, independent MP Monique Ryan versus Amelia Hamer. Monique Ryan has advocated strongly on issues relating to climate change, housing and integrity, making her a pretty big target for conservative foghorns and well-funded pro-fossil fuel outfits like Advance. She's also demonstrated an uncanny knack for triggering right-wing men online. One of her big wins this term was with a campaign she initiated to force the government to take some action on HEX debt, to index it to the lower of the Consumer Price Index or the Wage Price Index. And make no mistake, this would not have happened without the push from the member for Kooyong. If nothing else, I think this serves as evidence that crossbench pressure can work, despite what the major parties would have you believe. Sad side note, the government collects more from HEX than it does from our main fossil fuel tax. As a first-term MP, Monique Ryan has arguably achieved more than what you'd have expected to see from a first-term MP from one of the major parties where, let's be honest, their role is largely to sit up the back and be seen but not heard, often not free to express their own opinions without being turfed out of the party. Which brings us to Amelia Hamer.
The reality is, in politics, if you're worried about something that someone puts on social media about you, you're probably in the wrong business.
Thank you!
As you'll be reminded any time you read an article about her, she comes from Liberal Party royalty. Amelia Hamer is the grandniece of former Victorian Liberal Premier Sir Rupert Hamer. If you're not up with your 70s and 80s state politics, you may be more familiar with the Hamer Hall, Melbourne's concert hall that was named after him. For a suburb like Kooyong, one that at least up until last election had played blue, this is a sort of name recognition that money can't buy. Hamer went to Oxford, a fact that the Libs and the media will remind you of any chance they get, it would seem. When she was at Oxford, she was the editor of the Oxford Student News. That is until she was removed as editor. Now that's a Google rabbit hole. Hamer has spent the majority of her adult life outside the seat of Kooyong and outside Victoria for that matter. She returned to Australia at the height of the pandemic and became stuck here, her words, we'll get to that later, picking up a job in Canberra as a policy advisor to Jane Hume, returning to Melbourne in 2022 after the coalition were kicked out of government. This background might seem a bit blah, but it's kind of necessary to help get your head around some of the shenanigans that have gone on over the past few weeks.
Shenanigans! Shenanigans! Shenanigans!
Yeah. So once the Josh speculation died down, the battle for Kooyong simmered along relatively quietly until the first shots were fired by the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party whacked up a billboard in the heart of Kooyong pointing to Ryan's voting record, with their billboard supporting a popular coalition attack line. Now it's worth pointing out that looking at someone's voting record at that level is far from perfect. You can view a politician's voting record and sites like this one make it easier to compare how an MP votes compared to someone else. While the 77% figure here may well be correct. If that's the mark you want to measure MPs on, then it invites some fairly unflattering comparisons that I'm sure the Liberal Party wouldn't like to see on a billboard. Pick a coalition senator, for example, and you'll find that the vast majority will have voted the same way as this potato 90% of the time or more. Or check out Pauline Hanson, who I'm not sure would win too many votes in Kooyong. The Liberals sure do vote a hell of a lot like Pauline Hanson. I mean, Amelia Hamer will vote with Peter Dutton 100% of the time. I'm not sure the Liberals in Kooyong would necessarily like to remind their voting constituents that a vote for her is a vote for him. But anyway, I think you get the point, and that is that comparisons like these don't necessarily tell the full story. It doesn't tell you what divisions an MP has supported, and it doesn't tell you whose divisions they've supported. You need to dig a lot deeper if you want to see the full story, which is a bit more time consuming. So here are some facts. As at the 29th of November 2024, Monique Ryan had supported 51% of Labor divisions, 42% of Coalition divisions, 57% of Greens divisions, and probably not surprisingly, 88% of crossbench divisions. Or as she puts it,
well, look, in this term of Parliament, the Greens have put up 37 motions to a vote in the House, and I voted for them on 26 occasions out of 37. That's not very many.
She's right, you know.
I think it's probably fair to say that the billboard rustled some feathers. Then we moved on to the dodgy data harvesting that the Liberal Party and Labor like to engage in every election. I've already looked at that though, so you can check out that video here if you're interested. Corflutes. Now I have to admit, I didn't know what a corflute was until I took an interest in politics. Here's a fun fact. Corflute is a brand name for a type of corrugated plastic sheeting. So those signs you're no doubt seen attached to people's fences or staked into their front lawns around the country at the moment, they're printed on corflutes. Political candidates take the corflute business seriously, and one thing you can pretty much guarantee every election cycle is that there's going to be some sort of corflute drama. Google election corflute drama and you'll find that it's a story genre all of its own. This time around, Monique Ryan's husband was caught removing a rather large-looking Amelia Hamer sign. There's really no sugarcoating it because this was peak stupid and it was a pretty embarrassing look. I think everyone can probably agree with that. If there was an issue with signage, it should have just been reported to the council. The Libs would have been licking their lips when the footage came out, and Sky News have been dining out on it ever since. Then on the flip side, more recently, Monique Ryan's signage was on the receiving end of what was probably a more disturbing incident.
Professor Greg Mallam specialises in spinal surgery, but in this video he was focused on burying bodies.
Just finishing the job, boys. You always got to bury the body.
That body, a Monique Ryan campaign sign he tore down and stomped on.
Always remember, guys, good technique. And then dispose of the evidence. Always remember, boys, bury the body under concrete.
With footage circulating on social media, he was quickly called out.
Although the Libs were quick to confirm, though, that this guy was not a Liberal Party member, although it would be interesting to know who this guy usually votes for. Anyway, signage and corflute drama aside, let's look at housing, because Amelia Hamer has described housing as the core issue facing the country at the moment. Look, I tend to agree. In a profile/puff piece in the Australian Financial Review, Hamer spoke about the uncertainty young people face when trying to get into the housing market. I mean, she is, as the AFR pointed out, a renter wanting to get into the housing market. Indeed, she's been keen to point out to anyone that would listen that she's a renter.
They're struggling to pay their rent. I know my rent's gone up significantly. I'm a renter.
I live in a one-bed apartment.
She's worked hard to make it part of her brand. And I mean, it would seem that it is true in a very similar way to this 77% thing being true. It may be true to say that she's a renter, but it just doesn't tell you the full story. Are you picking up on a trend here? So whilst Amelia Hamer is a renter, she also happens to own a couple of investment properties, one in the UK and one in Canberra. So a more accurate description might be Amelia Hamer is a landlord that chooses to rent within the electoral boundaries of the seat in which she's currently running. And by wanting to get into the housing market, she must mean she wants to get into the housing market for a third time. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people saying, so she owns a couple of investment properties, so what? To that, I'd say really not the ownership of the property that bothers me so much, it's the effort that's been made to sell Hamer as the millennial renter that bothers me. A renter wanting to get into the housing market. It's misleading, or if I'm being super polite, it's misleading by omission.
I'm hoping to provide a voice for younger Australians. So I'm in my 30s. We don't have a lot of politicians, and we don't have a lot of politicians in the Liberal Party who are my age. And what I want to do is people in their 20s and people in their 30s in Kooyong and, around Australia are sort of feeling like they're getting a bit of a raw deal. And I want to be able to listen to those people and advocate for them on issues that are important to them.
And the Liberal Party were clearly keen to sell the image here. A young, successful woman, and given their well-documented women problem, that's a big tick already. A renter who understands the struggles of her fellow millennials.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Which, it needs to be said, make up a good slab of Kooyong voters. But unlike many other people her age, it would appear as though Amelia has options. I mean, she could sell off one or both of her investment properties and purchase something within Kooyong, for example. I mean, that is, if she's looking to settle in Kooyong. Maybe she's just waiting to see how the election pans out, who knows. I guess to be fair to her, at least she's renting in the electorate already and isn't just saying that she'll move there if she wins. We've seen that before. And if you were still feeling sorry for Amelia Hamer and her struggle to get into the housing market, and you're willing to look past the 2 investment properties she already owns, then it's probably best to hold your horses, because it turns out she's also a beneficiary of a $20 million trust fund. At this point, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that whilst Hamer may be a renter, it would appear as though that's more by choice than necessity, which might make her a little less relatable to her fellow kids.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Which I would guess might be one reason to focus more on the renter persona, and for her not to really bring up the landlord/trust fund baby thing when doing the media rounds. If there was one criticism of Josh Frydenberg that seemed to resonate with voters last time around, and a criticism that probably stung him a little bit personally, it was that he'd abandoned his electorate. This couldn't have been summed up any better than by the image of his empty chair at the Kooyong Candidates Forum last election, where he'd failed to turn up.
Very iconic.
And true to Liberal form, Amelia Hamer followed in those proud footsteps by pulling out of this year's Kooyong Candidates Forum at the last minute.
If you want to run for public office, don't run away from an interview or a debate.
The reason that she gave was pretty flimsy. Essentially, she blew off the 500-odd people that had turned up to the Candidates Forum to join a phone conference call type thing with Angus Taylor. And that whole thing seemed hastily slapped together, given Team Amelia appeared to have only pushed out the SMS invitations roughly 15 minutes before she'd been scheduled to take the stage at the Candidates Forum. I know, I'm a cynic, but to me, this sure as hell looks like some senior libs jumping in to provide some cover in order to give their candidate a reason to pull out of the forum at the last minute. And maybe that seems a little tinfoil hat to you, but it doesn't look like the Liberals are all that keen on having Amelia venture out alone, unless it's to pop up on their extended PR arm. But back on housing, it's worth pointing out that Hamer is a bit of a contradiction. She wants to help more locals achieve the dream of home ownership. Now, if you want to take that on face value, which personally I wouldn't, but that's totally up to you, then you'd think that she'd be big on increasing supply to help all millennials into homes of their own. Well, sort of. You see, Hamer, she's against increasing housing density in the more affluent suburbs. I guess she wants to make the dream of home ownership available to everyone, so long as it's not in her backyard. Now, to be fair, perhaps the NIMBY strategy might play quite well to certain segments within Kooyong. It just stands at polar opposites to her aim to help more locals achieve the dream of home ownership, don't you think? Anyway, after being outed as a landlord and trust fund baby, Amelia Hamer seemed to go to ground before reappearing with, or behind, next to Jane Hume in a fairly weird doorstop/announcement type interview thing.
The elusive Liberal candidate for Kooyong has broken her silence.
Sorry to cut in here, but I'm not sure it's a great sign when Channel 9, which generally skews more toward the LNP end of the spectrum, is describing you as elusive, but carry on.
The elusive Liberal candidate for Kooyong has broken her silence after it emerged that she's a renter and a landlord.
But questions quickly and obviously turned to Amelia Hamer's property holdings. A lot of her campaigning has her tagged as a renter, with no mention of her being a landlord in both Canberra and in London. But Ms Hamer denies that has damaged her chances.
I think the reality is people acknowledge you can be both. You can be renting and you can also own a property. We also talk about the struggles of being a landlord in the state of Victoria at the moment, because that is really, really hard.
Yeah, Alicia, she's made it clear she is not a property investor here and is unlikely to ever become one because she says Victoria is a terrible state to be a landlord.
The struggles of being a landlord in the state of Victoria at the moment, because that is really, really hard.
Oh, somebody please think of the
landlords. It's becoming increasingly rare to spot Hamer on TV without Jane Hume standing close by like a chaperone. Awkward, not exactly awe-inspiring. Almost like the Liberal Party is trying to shield her. It's weird. I know politics can be rough, but I reckon this is giving off vibes that you're in need of some babysitting. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but here's Amelia Hamer being asked why she's telling Liberal voters in Kooyong to preference the Libertarian Party at number 2 on her how to vote card, before deferring to Jane Hume after making a meal of it.
Why did you preference the Libertarian Party?
Oh, look, you know, we the preferences are sort of allocated in terms of, you know, which, you know, I hope the preferences actually don't matter, to be honest, because if we get across the line, they don't. The Libertarian Party is, you know, a reasonable party, and we allocate the preferences according to the parties that, you know, we think that the order should be.
So was that random, or you did choose it?
So the Libertarian Party, yeah, happy to put that number 2, yeah.
Does the Libertarian Party align with Kooyong's values?
In Kooyong, the Liberal Party will be directing preferences to the Libertarian Party, whose policies include abolishing renewable energy targets.
Please welcome my friend, Jordan Ditloff.
The Victorian Libertarian Senate candidate, Jordan Ditloff, spent more than 2 years in prison after defrauding 47 victims.
The reality is that, you know, we do preferences across the country in different places, and you know, we put the Libertarian Party as number 2. We've got the ALP as number 3, and you know, that's a decision that we made.
At this point, Amelia asked Jane Hume to help.
So there's no justification behind it?
Do you want to add something to preference deals?
Yeah, sure. Only that, you know, preference deals are a decision for the division, and they make them right around the country at the same time. It's not something that's done necessarily on a seat-by-seat basis.
But the Libertarian Party have quite extreme views from the Liberal Party. Is that taken into account when you make a preference deal?
Every party has very different positions from the Liberal Party, and it's always a decision that we have to make.
To me, that exchange tells me everything I need to know about what the people of Kooyong would get from a junior Liberal candidate. They're getting just another number, someone that has absolutely no influence on the decisions or the direction of the party, who will just do what she's told and vote how she's told to vote. Someone that will hide out up on the backbench until the next election comes around, just in time to come out again and throw wads of cash at the electorate if there's any danger that the Libs might lose the seat again. Now, if you want to compare Amelia Hamer's how to vote card with that of the independent candidate, the difference is pretty obvious. And what would an election be without some good old-fashioned pork barrelling? I mean, it really is a Liberal Party classic, isn't it? It's par for the course and all that.
Our roads are full of potholes. I mean, Glenferrie Road, which is just out here next to this polling booth, we counted the potholes in that road, and there are, 278 potholes in that road.
Isn't that a council issue?
So, in this road, this is actually a state road, and as you'll know well from...
You're running in the federal election, you do know that, right?
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
So your promise is to fix the potholes?
Yeah, it's one of the things we're going to do. $7.5 million towards fixing our arterial roads here. It's one of the key issues that people are focused on in this community.
Aaron Smith on X has done an excellent job of unpacking the Liberals' Kooyong announcements. Essentially, besides the run-of-the-mill pork, the Libs would also appear to be throwing cash at projects that are already committed and funded by council. Good job. The Liberal Party are at pains to argue that this isn't pork barrelling. Look, I reckon you can call it what you like, but dumping bucket loads of cash into an electorate you're trying to win back that's sitting on a knife's edge, maybe it's just because I'm downwind, but I'm getting a decent old whiff of bacon. Anyway, just when I thought I was done, the Libs dropped some more spice. They came out with push polling allegations. Now, push polling essentially is a tactic used to try and manipulate people's views toward a candidate or an issue. It's a tactic that's generally frowned upon, although I have no doubt that it's widely used by lobby groups, if not political parties, the world over. The audio from the polls leaked out, so here it is, and you can decide how big of a sin this one is for yourself.
At the upcoming federal election, who of the following will receive your first preference vote? Please press 1 for an independent. Press 2 for Labor. Press 3 for the Liberal National Coalition. Press 4 for the Greens. Press 5 for One Nation. Press 6 for any other party or candidate. Or press 7 for undecided. Does the Coalition's proposal to build 7 government-owned nuclear reactors make you more or less likely to vote Coalition? Please press 1 for more likely, press 2 for less likely, or press 3 for vote unchanged. Of the following, which is the main reason you would oppose the Liberals' nuclear energy plan? Please press 1 for higher energy prices, press 2 for risk of incident explosion, press 3 for nuclear waste management, press 4 for reducing investment into renewable energy, press 5 for high build cost for nuclear, or press 6 for I support the Liberal nuclear plan. The CSIRO have estimated that it will cost $600 billion to build and roll out the Liberals' nuclear plan. Of the following, how would you most like to see their nuclear plan paid for? Please press 1 for increase on taxes, press 2 for increased government debt, press 3 for cuts to government services or programs, or press 4 for none of these, I don't support nuclear. Please consider a scenario where Peter Dutton changed his mind and reversed his position on nuclear. Now, at the upcoming federal election, who would you vote for? Please press 1 for an independent, press 2 for Labor, press 3 for the Liberal National Coalition, press 4 for the Greens, press 5 for One Nation, press 6 for any other party or candidate, or press 7 for undecided.
Now, the Libs have vaguely pointed toward lobby group Climate 200 as being the source of the polling, and I guess given the content of the poll, that's probably plausible. And that would also make this response from Monique Ryan equally as plausible.
There is a story in the 9 newspapers this morning with Liberals saying that push polling is being used in some Teal seats against their candidates. Is that happening? Are you aware of it? And would it be something that you would support?
I'm not aware of any polling in the electorate of Kooyong. I certainly haven't undertaken any. And I wouldn't know what questions are being asked of people if that is happening. I think push polling is not ideal. Polling that then seeks to influence the way that people think or
that's the allegation in this story in the 9 newspapers this morning. I think it's happening in a very seat close to you, held by Zoe Daniel, apparently.
Okay. Yeah, it's not something of which I have any knowledge, but I don't think it's a great idea.
So I guess fair play, right? Unless the Liberal Party wants to start holding candidates accountable for the actions of lobby groups, in which case we can head down that slippery slope and hold Liberal candidates like Amelia Hamer accountable for the actions of Advance, if you like. I don't reckon the Liberal Party would be too keen to go down that path. And to top it off, Hamer now seems to be suggesting that there's some sort of dirt file being shopped around. To be honest, in this instance, I'd be surprised if that's true. Any dirt seems to be publicly available information that members of the community seem to be turning up. It's all stuff you can find with a Google search.
Instead of talking about the cost of living, she's been forced to answer questions about being a beneficiary of a $20 million trust fund.
Let's be very clear about the way that people found out. People found out because Monique Ryan's volunteers, Monique Ryan's team, put together a dirt file and put that on the internet. So I just want to make that really clear. Thank you for your time.
Is there anything else they should know about? Anything else voters need to know?
The thing I really liked about this dropping the dirt file allegation and then scurrying away is the contrast between the treatment here versus the treatment Monique Ryan received and the subsequent mountains of content generated when she declined an interview with a Sky News talking head.
I'm going to just do something a little bit different here. We did try to speak to Monique Ryan this morning. We asked her team whether it would be okay. She hasn't taken up that invitation to us, but she is here. So we might just see if we can ask her this morning how their campaign is going. As you can see, Monique, hi. Hi, how are you going this morning? We're just live on Sky.
I'm actually just trying to...
Oh, yeah, we don't want to interrupt, but we just wanted to...
Is that right?
Yeah, we are. Well, in the interest of a bit of transparency, we just thought maybe we just want to know how your campaign's going this morning.
It's going well, thanks, Laura.
Yep.
But I am here to engage with voters. We're at pre-poll. It's the middle of the election campaign. So I'm not sure that it's really ideal for you to be interrupting that process.
Have you had any other have you had any other thoughts about whether it's okay to pay influencers?
Thanks.
Sorry, Laura, she's already declined the interview.
Yeah, I know, but we are in public. This is in the interest of transparency, wouldn't you thought?
She's
No?
already declined the interview. If you could just go back to...
Okay, so we tried.
Sure, it's not a great look, but I guess if you're Monique Ryan, you've got to weigh up the risk versus reward in speaking to Sky. It looked like a gotcha setup, so not a lot to be gained. And the reality is Sky have gone quite hard at Monique Ryan, throwing their support behind Hamer to the point where you really have to start asking yourself at what point should a candidate have to declare that some of this sort of stuff is really just in-kind sponsorship, or whatever you want to call it. The volume and nature of the coverage has been pretty astonishing, really. Astonishing's probably not the right word. Disturbing is probably more appropriate, I'd say. On balance, I think this time around the battle for Kooyong is even spicier than the last time. So who do I think will win? To be perfectly honest, I think it's a coin toss right now. Prior to the redistribution, I'd have said Monique Ryan would have had the edge, but I reckon that redistribution might have evened things up a little bit. Kooyong absorbed a chunk of Toorak, which is probably one of the posher areas in Melbourne and a strong Liberal zone, and it's a case that there's still a certain percentage of the vote in Kooyong that just won't budge. The traditional Liberal vote that will continue to vote Liberal till the day that they die. And I think some of that vote could have been added to with the absorption of that Toorak region.
I'd like you to meet...
Brenda. For the first time, Brenda is voting in Kooyong. Voters like her have already made up their mind.
What do you know about Amelia?
Young. I think exciting. I think we need a woman. I think it's good.
If you don't mind me asking, how have you traditionally voted in previous elections?
Same old, same old. Liberal.
For Monique Ryan, whether or not she gets over the line or not may well depend on how many new younger voters have come on to the electoral roll. Voters that are smart enough to see through the fake millennial, hey, I'm just like you narrative the Libs have been working so hard to sell. Don't be surprised if this seat comes down to a few hundred votes.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.